welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to do my January wrap-up. I read a total of 35 things in January with an average of a 3.285 rating. So let's get started. The first thing that I read in January that kickstarted off my year was Peachy Flippin' Keen by Molly Harper. This is the 1.5 in the Southern Electric series. I originally didn't read this when I was originally reading the Southern Electric series, mostly because I had heard some pretty mixed things and a lot of people were saying you could skip it and read on to book 2. However, I was just missing this world, so I went back and read this book. So the summary of Peachy Flippin' Keen is it follows the characters from book 2 and basically what leads up to book 2, and it's very much a prequel. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. However, this is a very generous 3-star novella because it doesn't really add much to the world and it's just a precursor to all the events that happen in book 2, and nothing really happens except you get more backstory, but it pretty much is all covered in book 2. I just really like these characters, so I ended up giving this a 3 star. The next thing that I read was also a novella, and this was Once Ghosted, Twice Shy, which is the 2.5 in the Reluctant Royal series by Alyssa Cole. This is following the guard of the prince and the woman that she ends up meeting, and it kind of is told through multiple points in time, which is where this story brought me down. I ended up giving this one a 3 star as well. This was my least favorite in the series so far. This is not due to the length of the story. It was mostly due to how the story was formatted. I didn't like how it kind of was jumping between time periods, and I overall didn't enjoy that, and otherwise I really enjoyed the characters. It's just the time frame didn't make sense to me. I read Even the Tree Nymphs Get Blues, which is 2.5 in the Mystic Bio series by Molly Harper. Like, basically the beginning of the month was just me catching up on some series that I was loving in the beginning of last year. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It follows a tree nymph as she immigrates to the Mystic Bayou, and she comes in contact with this guy, and it's kind of telling why she doesn't trust scientists. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was cute, it was short, but nothing really happened substantial to the story arc overall that is going on in Mystic Bayou. Next, I read Blitzed, which is the 3rd book in the Playbook series by Alexa Martin. This is a series that typically follows the players in the same football team, and I received an e-arc of this through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. This follows a player and the bar owner who has been kind of a character throughout the series. I ended up giving this one a 3 star. I just, for some reason, the ending of these books have been what's been dragging these ratings down for me, and this one was just my least favorite ending of them all. Overall, I really enjoyed these characters, and I really enjoy the female protagonist in this story. It's just, I felt like everything had to be kicked up an extra notch. Overall, I gave it 3 stars, and if there's another book in this series, I will be continuing on. Next, I read the first book in the Book of the Ancestor series by Mark Lawrence, which is Red Sister. I had been wondering when I was going to get around to reading this book, and apparently January was the time to start new series. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Assassin Nun School is honestly the best way to describe this book. However, this book is a lot more than that, and it talks about a lot more than that. I was a bit confused at the beginning of the story because a lot was going on, and it was over my head, and I hadn't read an adult fantasy book that had gone this hard in a while, as well as there's some animal abuse in it, and animal abuse is something that's very hard for me to be a 5-star reader for, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I do plan on continuing on with this series very soon, however, because this book was just, it was just something else that made me really, you know, I was really into it. Next, I read Truth or Beard by Penny Reed. This was my first Penny Reed book, and I was also reading this during Smuttathon, but decided I was just not going to do a Smuttathon wrap-up because I didn't read very many books during Smuttathon. This was one of them that I actually did end up reading. This book is about a woman who has been like in love with this one twin and has basically despised this other twin her whole life, and then ends up making out with one of them and not realizing it was the twin she's despised her whole life. And then other stuff happens, and it's just, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It's very hard to sell me on, we both know that you don't think I'm the right person, and I'm still gonna make out with you and do more with you anyways at the beginning of a book. And it doesn't really redeem this character, and the way the characters are written wasn't for me. However, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about another Penny Reed book, which I also read during Smuttathon, which was Neanderthal Seeks Human. This is about a woman who finds out her boyfriend's cheating on her and wants to leave her, and basically gets fired all in the same day, and she kind of gets with an alpha guy, and I kind of realized between these two books that Penny Reed might not be for me. I'm giving her one more shot with a different character in the Winston Brothers series. However, I don't know if it was this time was just not the time for me to read Penny Reed, or if it's just Penny Reed is not for me. So overall, I gave both of these works 3 stars. However, I feel like they were very generous 3 stars for me to get. Next, however, I want to talk about This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a science fiction book written with very beautiful prose, and it's about 2 rival spies basically trying to murder each other throughout time, and maybe something more happening between them. And I'm just giving this book 4 stars. I feel like upon reread, and everyone says this happens upon reread, that you end up falling in love with the story more. Next, I read Candlebite, which is 4 short stories that take place on Candlebite, and it was part of the Journey to the Last Jedi. I ended up reading this one because I wanted to read a different Journey to the Last Jedi book, and it said that this one came before it, and then I realized they were not like required reading in a specific order. But I wanted to read this one first anyways after reading this order sheet, because that's who I am as a person. Anyways, these are 4 short stories that take place on Candlebite, written by 4 different authors. I ended up liking 2 of the 4 short stories in this collection and not liking the other 2, and felt like we were just dragging at this point. So I ended up giving this collection 2 stars. I do recommend the Ray Carson and the Myra Grant stories. However, otherwise I would say this collection overall is skippable. Next, I read The Bookish Life of Nina Hill. This is about Nina Hill, who likes to have her life as organized as possible, works in a bookstore, and is part of a trivia team, and is the only child of a single mother, and just wants her life to stay the same. However, this is about to change when a dad who she's never met has suddenly died and has left her something. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It's cute and bookish and very charming. However, there were a couple of lines in this book that really rubbed me the wrong way, and I just couldn't look past them and give this book a full 5 stars. Next, I read The Tyrannosaur Chronicles, and the best way to describe this is the second part of the title, and that is the biology of tyrannic dinosaurs. And I ended up reading this as part of my oldest books on my TBR project, and I ended up giving this book 1 star. I felt like this read as a stuffy textbook that feels really inaccessible if you did not know what they were talking about ahead of time. And you're supposed to go in with knowledge of the biology of tyrannic dinosaurs, and this is supposed to be a leaping point. And I don't appreciate feeling like I'm supposed to be left out of the conversation in this book for most of the time. And it felt wrong to me, it felt inaccessible to me, and I gave it 1 star. Next, I read Emperors of the Deep, which, you know, again, second part of the title, the ocean's most mysterious, most misunderstood, and most important guardians. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I felt that this one was more fascinating than the Tyrannic Dinosaur book. However, it was a bit repetitive and quite dry in terms of writing style. Next, I read In an Absent Dream by Shauna Maguire. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series. My partner and I have been reading them together. This one is about Bundy, who was featured in book 1. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I don't know how to explain this without going into spoiler territory. However, towards the end of the book, something happens, and without going into too many details, if there was just a couple more pages explaining the repercussions of that before getting to the very end of the story, I probably would have given this book 5 stars. That's all I'm going to say on that. My partner ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. He likes the prequel ones more than he likes the sequel ones. Moving on. Next, I read The Swedish Prince, which is the 1st book in the Nordic Royal series. I don't know how to make this book like sound interesting without reading like the entire summary, or sound more interesting than I thought it was, because I ended up giving this book 2 stars. This is very lackluster and very cliche in my opinion, and I honestly was only reading it because I was interested in a later book in this standalone romance series, so I read the first one. I don't know, I could have just read the later book that I was interested in. Next, I read The Call, which is about an alternate Ireland, and basically they got in a fight with Fae, and now you have to survive the minute that you are called to the Fae lands, and it's basically a really unique and dark twisted Fae story. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I can't go into too many details because it is like obviously like a sci-fi thriller, but I'm looking forward to continuing on and finishing out this duology. Next, I read Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Maguire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and I again read this with my partner because we've been reading all of the Wayward Children books together, and I am so glad we got to see Jack and Jill again, and that's, I don't know how to explain this one without going into any details about this story any other stories that have happened prior to this one. I'm just glad we got to be back with Jack and Jill and seeing the repercussions of everything that's happened so far, and I enjoyed it. My partner enjoyed it less. Again, he likes the prequel ones more than the sequel ones, but I enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This was a book that I had been hesitant about reading for quite some time, and I ended up picking this up because my friend Wolfie from the Starlight System picked it out of all my books to read for me to read this month, and I ended up buddy reading it with them, so I had someone to talk about this with. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, which is actually kind of pretty generous looking back. Probably has something to do with the production quality of the audiobook, because I also listened to the audiobook alongside reading the physical book. Overall, I didn't like one of the perspectives and felt them to be very immature and kind of coming from a very weird place, and felt them to not be as authentic as they could have been, and the other to be over the top in everything that they were feeling. And I felt that the middle chunk kind of slagged quite a bit, and that the ending was very bittersweet. So I ended up giving this one a 3 star, but it's probably not as nice of a 3 star as it should. Next, I read what was probably my biggest accomplishment for this month, and it took me most of the month to finish, and that was From a Certain Point of View, which is 40 different retellings of 40 scenes from Star Wars by 40 different authors. I ended up giving this one a 4 star because there were a few stories that kind of were not for me and I didn't quite like, so I couldn't obviously give this collection a full 5 star. It would have just felt wrong. However, I really enjoyed quite a few stories in this collection, and it was a really good way to try out some of these authors for the first time. I overall really enjoyed it and felt it was a really nice way to see a different perspective of some of the scenes from Star Wars from the last 40-ish years. So next, I read The Stars We Steal by Alexa Dunn. I got this physical arc at BookNet Fest. I ended up buddy reading this with Caitlin from Caitlin Vanasse, and this is a Persuasion in Space retelling, which was really interesting for me to read because I had never read Persuasion before. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. This mostly has to do with some of these space elements, and I felt like, as someone who doesn't know a ton about space, I felt like some of the space elements just didn't make sense in this one. However, the real conflict with me for this one is the ending, and I felt like parts of the ending just didn't make sense to me and were kind of rushed. So overall, I gave this one 3 stars, but I'm very glad that I ended up reading it because it definitely kicked me into gear to wanting to read Persuasion later this year. Like I said in my oldest TBR books video, my last Jane Austen that I have to get. Next, I'm going to talk about 3 books all at once because I read the entirety of the Purin and the Ends of Days trilogy by Susan E. And this trilogy is Angelfall, World Afters, and End of Days. This is a angel trilogy about the apocalypse, and it's also got some romantic tension to it. I ended up giving every book in this trilogy 3 stars. I feel like this trilogy can be best summarized for me as too little too late. I felt like if I'd read this book series sooner, I might have rated them higher. However, I did have a fun time reading this whole trilogy and felt that it was a good encapsulation of, you know, this time period and talking about the apocalypse and sci-fi and angels. However, I'm not kind of wondering if I'm just not an angel book person, because I pretty much feel like I only picked this one up at this point because it was something that had been on my TBR for a really long time. So I might just not have been an angel book person then either. So next, I read What Kind of Girl, which I received an e-arc through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. This book was pitched as Girl in Pieces meets Moxie, and Girl in Pieces was a book that I really didn't like, but Moxie was a book that I really did like. So this was a interesting choice for me to pick up. This is about a girl who had walked into school with a bruise on her face and walked to the principal's office and said that her boyfriend had hit her, and this is the repercussions of this, and basically the whole student body is taking sides. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars. I feel like this book handles so many different topics, and sometimes it can feel like too many topics. However, they're all handled in very careful and thoughtful and nuanced ways. Unfortunately for me, the reason this book is only a 3 star is it took me way too long to understand the formatting that is going on with this story. It's told through different character archetypes, and you don't know the name of the person you're following, and I understand that that is part of the story. However, I just didn't get it, and it just kind of took me out of the story that I was reading. Next, I picked up Eager, which is the surprising secret life of beavers and why they matter, and I honestly gonna tell you, I didn't think it was going to be this impactful of a read. I thought I was on a nonfiction everything sucks like spree. However, this book really surprised me, and honestly, go thank a beaver and go read this book. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I have a new appreciation for beavers. It definitely repeats itself in some places if you're like binge reading it. However, it was enjoyable. I learned stuff about beavers, and what more can you want from a book about beavers, you know? Next, I read 6 books for my Goodreads Readers Also Enjoy video. I will leave that linked in the card up above. I definitely recommend checking that one out if you are interested in my thoughts on any of these books. I won't be going into any details except for telling you my star rating. However, I definitely go into more details telling you what I thought about them without going into any spoilers in that video. The books I read for that video were Ask Again Yes, which I gave 4 stars, The Music of What Happens, which I gave 2 stars, The Gilded Wolves, which I gave 4 stars, The Flat Share, which I gave 3 stars, Simple Wild, which I gave 4 stars, and A Prince on Paper, which I gave 4 stars. Next, I read Can't Escape Love, which is book 2.6 in the Reluctant Royal series. I ended up giving this one a nice 5 stars. This is my favorite one in this series so far, and this is probably due to the characters involved. I really enjoyed both of the characters and seeing their story. Next, I read Barbed Wire Heart by Tess Sharpe. This I received an e-arc of through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. This book has since come out quite a while ago. This was a backlist arc that I was trying to catch up on. This is about a girl who is the only child of the biggest criminal in the area, and the rules are simple: never cut the drugs, guns are meant to be shot, and family is everything. And I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and it is really lengthy, and it reminds me of how talented of a writer that Tess Sharpe is. It's brutal, it's messy, it deals with some real tough topics like family and power and abuse and obviously, you know, drugs and guns and death, and it's really it's really good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next, I read Caves of Steel, which is the first book in the Robot series by Isaac Asimov. I read my first Isaac Asimov book, no big deal. This is about a detective who has been assigned a basically an ASI named R. Daniil, and they are solving a murder, and no big deal. I now love a robot. It's fine. Everything's fine. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I very early on caught on to who done it. However, I didn't know why they had done it. So I was really intrigued into figuring out why they done it. And Isaac Asimov did turn me on my head and make me question my own conclusion quite a few times. So I will give him that. However, I ended up giving this one a 4 star, mostly because of writing things, you know, as one does. I love R. Daniil. Can't wait to continue on in the series. It was a treat. Me and my partner read this together. Also, in case you were curious, we read a lot of things together. We went and read this one. It was a good time. Next, I read The Paper Magician, which is the first book in the Paper Magician series. This is about a girl who has just graduated from school, and she is getting placed in her placement for what mage she's going to basically be. And she is told that there's not enough paper magicians in existence, and therefore she has to become a paper magician. And I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I do not understand how the author wanted to say she was the best in her school and the best at basically everything, and so good she could have gone and done this other thing if she didn't get the money to go do this. But say that, you know, she was number 1 in school, but she was forced to do this career. Number 1 wouldn't have been forced to do the career. Number 2 might have. Number 3 might have. It just didn't add up. And then on top of that, there's a very clearly aligned love story headed for her and the guy who's currently her tutor, and we all know that this was the whole point of this, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I gave it 2 stars. The magic system was interesting, but that was the only thing I had going for it. And the last thing that I read in the month of January was The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This is a thriller about a woman who finds out that she's inherited a home on her 25th birthday and the crime that happened there, and I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It didn't make sense to me, and then when it did, I kind of missed it not making sense to me. And I'm not going to go into too many details. I'm hopeful that it was just this book because I have another Lisa Jewell on my TBR, and I'm hoping that it was just this one that had me confused. And there was 2 characters whose names I kept getting mixed up in the perspectives, and I'm hoping that that was part of my problem of me being confused. Overall, looking forward to seeing the kind of stuff that I read for the rest of the year. What about you? What did you read in the month of January? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what you saw here today, be sure to like and subscribe. I normally post videos on Wednesdays. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.